It's a Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies, and boy, are the Memphis Grizzlies locked in. You're locked in on Locked On, and the Grizzlies are locked in on the upcoming season. At least so says Luke Kennard. We'll talk about how much he loves Zach Edey and how Ja Morant's MVP odds are climbing. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy to be back with you here on this Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax, one of your hosts, and as always, it is great to be able to say one of your hosts because that means my co-host, Damichael Cole, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, is along for the ride as always. I like to envision us partner as you on the motorcycle and me in the sidecar, like the little sidecar with the big goggles. Like you're the one that looks cool in the leather jacket. Everybody's like,
I've never heard you say this. I've never heard you say this, Joe. Over 2 years, I've never heard you say this.
Well, I'm opening up to you, right? That's part of a relationship developing. That's just my vision of us. You're the cool one in the big cool motorcycle, and I'm in the sidecar looking up longingly at you. Damichael Cole's awesome. I'm happy to be his partner. I'm happy that you are along with us on this ride that we call Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Damichael had a great solo show on Friday. I loved listening to it. Got a chance to speak with Ja Morant a little bit, get some feedback on him. It was a great show. Make sure you're checking out that episode if you haven't caught it for whatever reason. And obviously, each and every time an episode drops, make sure you're subscribed, both audio and visual, to Locked On Grizzlies. Damichael, I hope you had a wonderful weekend, and I know that you're excited. Your Packers won. We'll talk about who they beat. But your Packers won, and then your Vols won, a big one there in Oklahoma. So a good weekend for Damichael Cole. It was also a good weekend because you had a chance over the weekend to chat with one Luke Kennard. And people that are everydayers of the Locked On Grizzlies know how I feel about Luke Kennard. I've called him on numerous occasions one of the top 10 three-point shooters in NBA history. And I didn't stutter. I'm not backing down. I'm staring right into this camera, and I'm saying it again. Luke Kennard is one of the top 10 three-point shooters in NBA history, and I am thrilled that he is back in Memphis because I think he makes the Grizzlies better. He had some interesting things to say in the piece that was released by you over the weekend. The thing that caught my eye the most, partner, was in the headline, talking about how the Grizzlies are as focused as they have ever been as they begin 5-on-5 scrimmage work. Training camp begins here very soon. The team has gotten back together for lots of sessions. And Kennard seems to be insinuating that the vibe is different in a good way for the Grizzlies.
Yeah, so we already knew, I've said it on the show a couple times before that the Grizzlies have already kind of got together and started doing 5-on-5 workouts, right? And it's not everyone, so to speak, but a majority of the team has already went out of their way. Guys are working out. And it's not just, I think I said it in that story as well. It's not just the guys that are on the main roster, so to speak. It's the two-way guys. The E10 guys are in town as well. I saw Armando Bacot the other day, as well here in Memphis.
Virginia's own Armando Bacot. Stand up, Richmond.
Yeah. Shout out to Richmond. Shout out to the people out there. But and when you look at this situation with the Grizzlies, last season, a lot of these guys didn't play together, right? A lot of these guys are on the roster, but they didn't play together. So these 5-on-5 workouts, a lot of teams do them. The Grizzlies did it last offseason, right before the season. But Luke Kennard basically talked about the attention to detail, right? The focus, saying that we're locked in, basically. And here's the words that he used, because he was talking to me about the communication aspect, right? He's like, man, guys are talking, and it's almost like camp in a way. And he said, it's something I haven't really seen before. He said, we're really pushing each other and competing really hard. He said, I think that's going to go a long way We start that right now. We're getting a few steps ahead until the season starts. And that's what it's all about, right? Getting a head start, building that chemistry. They don't have a lot of new pieces, so to speak, but Luke Kennard still hasn't, I keep going to the fact that Luke Kennard and Brandon Clark have not played a lot of basketball games together. They've both been on the Grizzlies roster, the last 2 seasons. But they haven't played a lot of basketball together. Ja Morant, relatively speaking, Ja Morant and Luke Kennard have not played a lot of basketball together. You remember when Luke came in February, remember that? And then Ja ends up getting in early March. I think it's March 2nd, March 3rd, somewhere around there. He gets the 9-game suspension where he's away from the team. And then, late March, April, first round of the playoffs. And then, a couple games this past season. That's all the time we've seen of Luke Kennard and Ja Morant on the floor together. There's not a big sample size of it. So it's good to see that these guys are putting in this attention to detail. Luke Kennard is not a guy who, he's not a soundbite machine. So when he said that, caught my attention, Joe.
Very interesting, to say the least. And correct me if I'm wrong, partner, these 5-on-5 sessions, Memphis Grizzlies head coach Taylor Jenkins isn't involved, right? The coaching staff.
The coaches are doing their own thing right now. They're ramping up too. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So this is the players on their own making that conscious decision. Now, I know there's somebody on YouTube or Apple listening to this, and they're, shaking their fist at me wherever they're listening or watching. And they're saying, Joe, these are professional athletes. They should be doing this. We can say that until the cows come home. That's a very old man saying that I just used. We can say that all day.
Yeah.
But the reality is not everybody does that, right? There are guys that have their own nutritionists, their own trainers, their own group of dudes that they run 5-on-5 with. They will show up in Oklahoma City. I'm just using that as a random NBA city. If it was Locked On Thunder, they'd probably say you could show up in Memphis, right? I'll show up in Memphis when the season starts. I'm going to do my thing where I live, in Miami or Los Angeles. We've talked on this show countless times about NBA players living in these places half the year, and then half the year they spend the time in the city where they play. That's not what's happening here, right? And maybe on a smaller scale with certain players it is, but you're running 5-on-5 that they have 18 guys or 17 guys under contract right now. So they are doing this with dudes that are invested in trying to get this thing off on the right foot. They know how poorly last season started. I'd be willing to bet going into media day and training camp, that is going to be a common thread of something that we hear these guys talking about is starting fast because of how poorly they began last year and how it snowballed so quickly. They have to get off to a good start. I think they get that more than ever before.
For sure. And I think what stood out to me is the attention to detail because, let's be honest, this is a younger team. And sometimes with younger teams, not speaking specifically to the Grizzlies, more so in general here, when you have a younger team and there aren't many authoritative figures around, where, there's no coaches around and things like that, guys are probably going to, sure, we'll come work out, but they're going to BS their way through it, right? You're going to see, the center pulling up, shooting 10 3-pointers instead of working on his low post game line. Let's be honest. That's how this stuff can go sometimes. But I think the fact that Luke Kennard pointed that out, this wasn't anything that he told me. It's just me reading in between the lines and kind of inferring in a way that when you say guys are taking this really serious, it's the locked in part. He talked about the communication, the intensity and things like that. So they're bought in. And it's another thing that's kind of, grabbed my attention too is Luke Kennard also talked about, the coaches and the assistant coaches, which is what Jaren Jackson Jr. talked about as well. And I want to point that out because, we just touched on it with the coaches where they're game planning right now. And Jaren Jackson Jr. was the one that told us, he says, you can see that these coaches are in sync with Taylor Jenkins from a thinking perspective. Surely, there's already clearly definitive communication between the coaches and the players on what this thing will need to look like before training camp gets here. So, yeah, Joe, I think you're on the money. They have every intention of not only getting to a strong start in the regular season, which hasn't been a thing here, in the last 3-4 years. Strong regular season starts has not been a thing. But they have every intention of changing that, not just in the regular season, but in preseason as well.
And it might even mean that I have to pay more attention than I want to the blasted in-season tournament or the Emirates Cup. Or
There you go, Joe.
Whatever the hell it is. Yeah, I guess we want to win this stupid thing now, although the last team that won it fired their coach in response. So I don't know how good of a thing that is. Shout out to
They hung a banner though, right?
They hung an in-season banner. That's true. Let Damichael and I know what you guys think in the comments. Hit us up on X at Damichael C, at Joe Mullinax, excuse me. Let us know how you're feeling. Are you excited? Does this, rev you up a little bit? Or is it something that, it's kind of like one of those workout videos online that gets posted? Yeah, sure. Everybody's fired up before the old Mike Tyson adage, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Is it one of those kinds of things? I'm kind of leaning towards that, but I'm going to try to be more optimistic this year because last year sucked so much. So I'm going to lean into the positivity here on Locked On Grizzlies, at least for now. Hold me to it, Damichael. I'm counting on you to hold me to it.
I got you.
We're going to talk more next about Luke Kennard. You mentioned not much change, but the biggest change, both literally and figuratively, is Zach Edey being on the roster. And Luke had some interesting things to say about him. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, the season has begun, and you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. That's right. It's America's #1 sportsbook. And when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you think there's something that could be coming that is big in that contest, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's right. You heard me correctly. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Make sure that you are paying attention and locking in to FanDuel.com. Once again, that's FanDuel.com. Go check them out today. So, Damichael, from that same piece that you were just referencing about Luke Kennard and the Grizzlies being locked in these 5-on-5 sessions, he also had high praise for a very tall gentleman that now calls himself a Memphis Grizzly. That, of course, is rookie big man Zach Edey. Ja Morant, of course, you talked about it on Friday, also had a lot of praise for the big Mane, M-A-N-E. I feel like that has to be his nickname. I know we've kind of used that before, but that's a solid one. But anyway, I think that there's legitimate excitement about this guy joining the Grizzlies, and Luke Kennard just added on to the list of that reasons for optimism surrounding Edey in particular.
I mean, the list is getting
long but distinguished.
Yeah, with credible people. Like you said, distinguished. It is a distinguished list of people who are starting to, and Jay Huff as well. That was another guy I recently talked to and said he's making me better, when speaking of Zach Edey. So you got Jay Huff, throwing praise his way. Ja Morant, of course, Luke Kennard. I even talked to an assistant coach, at Purdue, a story that came out this morning. So assistant coach at Purdue, Brandon Brantley, worked with the post players who basically said that Zach is going to hold down the paint for the Grizzlies. But in particular with Luke Kennard, what stood out to me about his compliment of Zach Edey, which we'll get to in a second, exactly what he said. But this one was kind of unsolicited, unprovoked, whatever you want to call it. Like, I think we were talking. It wasn't like, hey, what do you think about Zach Edey? That wasn't it. We were just talking about the Grizzlies in general and players working out. And I think he was asked about the rookies, right? And he's like, oh, the rookies are coming along well. And, talking about, them kind of being assimilated. And then he just goes out and he basically says this. He says, Big Zach has surprised a lot of people out there, referring to in the 5-on-5 session. So we're looking forward to what he can do and how he can help us this year. Luke Kennard's a veteran, saying we're looking forward to what he can do and how he can help us this year. Ja Morant said this guy is definitely Rookie of the Year. Joe, I don't think it's me or you kind of like leading a hype train or anything like that. These are Grizzlies players' comments. Right. This isn't us saying, hey, everyone, Zach Edey's about to take the Grizzlies to the moon. Like, get on the rocket ship. This is Ja Morant saying, oh, easily Rookie of the Year. This is Luke Kennard, without even being asked specifically about Zach Edey, just talking about the rookies and say, oh, yeah, by the way, that's Zach Edey. He surprised us. And the fact that a 2-time National Player of the Year, number 9 pick in the draft, has surprised him, leave it there, Joe, because I think, again, center is a very hard position to instantly translate and have a lot of success at the NBA. Right. So I think we have to manage these expectations to a certain level. But the number one thing that we always talk about with rookies is confidence, right? Imagine if you were that rookie, Joe, or anyone listening right now. If you were that rookie and John Morant saying, oh, that's definitely Rookie of the Year. And Luke Kennard saying, this guy's going to help us. And J. Huff saying, he's making me better. I feel like as that rookie, that makes you just, you breathe easier because you know they're going to get you the ball. Because I think the confidence doesn't, like, lack of confidence comes in situations. Let's say you're Cam Spencer, right? You've been this big-time shooter your entire life, and then you're wide open in the middle of the second quarter, and when the Grizzlies are, down 8 and they need a big shot, and instead of passing it to you in the corner, John Morant drives to the basket and makes the layup, and you're thinking like, man, I've been getting that shot passed to me my entire life. He must doesn't believe in me. I don't think Zach Edey's going to get that type of treatment. I think based on what Luke Kennard, John Morant, and these guys, they're going to feed this guy. They're going to give him every chance, Joe, to prove that what they're seeing can be validated in the regular season.
What's most impressive to me is that it runs the gauntlet, right? It's John Morant, who's obviously a top 15, top 10, if you believe MVP odds, which we'll talk more about here in a moment. Top 15-ish player in the NBA. It's Luke Kennard, who's a middle-of-the-road NBA player. He's an elite three-point shooter, but that's about, give or take a pass here or there, what he brings to the table. Then you have Jay Huff, who's fighting to keep his NBA career going with this two-way contract, right? So you got three different levels of NBA existence, all saying similar things. And most of the time it's unprovoked, right? Yep. They're just saying it because that's, you guys need to see this dude. And for me, I keep going back to that, the Yahoo draft person who said it was the worst pick in NBA draft history. I think the surprise for these guys and for a lot of people, when you hear 7'4", 300 pounds, like I'm a pro wrestling fan, right, Damichael?
Yeah.
So I hear somebody say it like that, 7'4", 300 pounds, like Andre the Giant stands out in my mind. Or I close my eyes in my childhood and well, it's the Big Show, right? Like that's what these big, plodding, slow moving, the literal fee-fi-fo-fum, as opposed to what Zach Edey actually is. If you look at his combine numbers, he ain't slow, and he ain't a big plodding dude. He can move. If you watched him play in the limited minutes he played in Summer League, yes, he is not as fast as a guard. He's 7'4", 300 pounds. If you catch him in a switch, it's going to be a mismatch. But more often than not, he is going to be able to pick apart forwards and centers, given his size and the underrated ability that he has to move. I think that's probably what these guys are most surprised by, Damichael. They don't expect a 7'4", 300-pound dude to be moving the way he does. And that is going to create problems for a lot of NBA teams.
Yeah, you just hit it on the nail. I think the main thing when you talk about the Zach Edey, the biggest strengths, the biggest weaknesses, or whatever the case may be, Zach Kleiman pointed it out on that first day, after they drafted him. Everyone wants to talk about the idea of, bigs being played off the court and stuff like that. The Grizzlies believe they have a big that can take advantage and kind of be, can flip it around. He's going to be the big in their mind that makes you keep a big on the floor when you want to go small. Remember, I just always, when I think of Utah and Rudy Gobert in the playoffs a year against the Los Angeles Clippers. Luke Kennard was on that team, though. But on that year in the playoffs where Utah was the number 1 seed, and they lost to the Clippers in the second round, where Rudy Gobert pretty much got played off the floor because the Clippers went small and they had no answer. I think they had Terrence Mann. Rudy Gobert was guarding Terrence Mann, and Terrence Mann was having big games. Rudy Gobert at least in that series, and certainly decently, pretty much as his career, he's not a supreme offensive threat. He's not a guy you can have a wing on him, and he's not going to throw up 25 and 25. If you put a wing on Zach Edey, the Grizzlies believe that you're going to pay.
And if you watch college basketball the last 2 years, he will make you pay. This guy has an extensive skill set and toolkit of things to do in the post. He is not just a screen and roller. He has an impressive – he's like a bigger Jonas Valanciunas.
Yeah. The thought here is that you're going to need a big to slow him, to even have a chance. If you go with that, we're playing small, sure, Zach Edey might have his disadvantages when you go on that end, but it's easier to get the ball inside to Zach Edey, automatic 2 points, than him. If you throw 5 possessions of him guarding guys on the perimeter, he'll hold his own for some of them. And guys, for the most part, aren't going to knock down 5 straight threes or whatever the case may be, whereas he's probably going to either get fouled, lay it in, or kick it out to Desmond Bane or Ja Morant or whatever for a wide open shot.
It really is going to be fascinating to watch unfold. You've called him your X factor. I think that he is the most direct connection to this team returning to the 2 seed in the Western Conference. Even with all the talent and all the competition, the better that Zach Edey is, the better this Grizzlies team will be. I think it's that simple in that way. I'll let Damichael and I know how you feel about Luke Kennard being added to the list of guys that are excited to play with Zach Edey. We're excited about Ja Morant's MVP odds improving. Unless you're planning on making a bet, you might want to get that bet put in before the money doesn't make as much sense. We're going to talk about Ja Morant's MVP odds climbing coming up next on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, I want you to make sure that you should be subscribing not just to Locked On Grizzlies, but Locked On NBA as well. Make sure you're going and checking out Locked On NBA when this episode is complete. From the West Coast to the East Coast, North and South, everywhere that there's NBA basketball, Locked On NBA is there with great news and analysis. We will be making an appearance on Locked On NBA for season preview episodes here soon in the next few weeks. Make sure you're checking out Locked On NBA as your second watch or your second listen after you're done with Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die whip alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you are looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're going to be burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die whip alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to United States customers. Damichael will close out this episode of the show looking at Ja Morant's MVP odds. I tweeted or posted, whatever the heck it's called on X now. Moving up slowly but surely. He was at plus 3,000 the last time I checked. He had been at plus 3,400 before that. I think he has the 10th best odds over there on FanDuel, and it varies, from day to day. It can change. But the numbers keep improving. People keep believing, or people keep betting on Ja Morant to potentially be that MVP this year. I think that because in all these season previews we're about to do, partner, everybody's looking for hot takes, right?
Yeah.
I think the hot take here is Ja Morant wins the MVP. And a lot has to go right for Ja Morant to win the MVP. Like if Ja Morant's the MVP, I think that means Jaren Jackson Jr. is the defensive player of the year, or he's a top 15, all NBA player in his own right. All these guys play 70 or so games, things that haven't happened for this team the last few years, even when they've been really good, have to happen. So it seems improbable, right? And that's the odds kind of line up with that. But if there was ever somebody who had the combination of talent and chip on their shoulder to try to prove a bunch of people wrong, it's Ja Morant. And I think people are slowly but surely, as the season approaches, starting to remember that the Memphis Grizzlies do in fact exist. And their best player is still indeed Ja Morant, and he is healthy. And in a good way for Memphis, at least, he's angry.
Yeah, and you were getting to a very important point when you talk about the MVP stuff there, and it's the narrative.
Right.
He has one of the best narratives going into this season, and not just off the court stuff. I'm talking on the court as well, because of the fact that everyone saw very up close last year how bad the Grizzlies can sometimes be without Ja Morant and without Tyus Jones being the backup point guard we talked about. And I saw one of our commenters pointed out some injuries that the Grizzlies had, at the beginning of the season last season when they started off 1-8, and that's fair to a certain degree to me. But at the same time, those injuries pale in comparison, in my opinion, when you have Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. on the floor. As long as you have
those, star league. It's a star league, and you still had. If you don't want to call Marcus Smart a star anymore, or if you don't want to call him one at all, fine. You still had Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. To start 1-8 is unacceptable.
Exactly, simple as that. So with Ja Morant, I think it is very clear, as we saw last season, 6-3 when he played, the value is there. Like, the value is there, and I think it's going to be even more clear this season because they don't have a Tyus Jones as the backup point guard. I talked recently about the idea that Derrick Rose, when he was in lineups with certain guys, had kind of like an even net rating. And if that's kind of the way it plays out, like you get even net rating type numbers from your backup point guard spot, and Ja Morant is plus 7, 8, or whatever the case may be, that is a MVP type of that is the definition of most valuable player. So I think from a value standpoint, based on the way we saw last season play out, the Grizzlies were bad without Ja. The fact that he didn't play a lot last season, there is some legitimacy to the idea that he's a candidate. You're going to have your regulars that are always going to be in there. Luka's going to put up, just crazy. He's going to put up insane numbers. That, Jokic, if he's healthy, is going to be, he's one of the most efficient players to ever play the game.
Joel Embiid just signed a massive extension. He's one of the most productive big men in the history of the NBA. He just exists at the same time that Nikola Jokic does.
If he can squeeze out 65 games, if he played 65 games last season, he probably wins it. But if he can get 65 games, Joel Embiid as well. But I definitely think mentioning Ja Morant's name in that conversation is very important because of the fact that he plays point guard, most important position in the game of basketball today. And he runs the show in Memphis. There's he runs the show. And I think if the Grizzlies are to take the leap and get back to where they were, and his numbers have you've seen his assist numbers go up over the course of the years. And now the fact that he's going to have, there's an argument to be made, but I think when you combine the starting lineup and the bench unit, he has more shooting than he's had in the last couple of years. And he just has better individual talent. Like Desmond Bane is been a great shooter, but Desmond Bane now, he's hitting step back, side step 3-pointers. It's not just a flyby anymore. Like, he can give it to you however you want it. So, and then on top of that, you got Jaren Jackson Jr. developing as this individual, forceful, down low presence who understands when I got these little guys on me, I'll get out the way. Let me finish this off. So I think all of that, like you said, if Jaren has a great season, it'll kind of probably help Ja's chances. Same thing for Desmond Bane. Same thing for Marcus Smart, all those guys. But I think it's very realistic to put him in the conversation. I don't think at this point in time he's going to win it. But I think numbers-wise, it's very realistic for me to see 27-9 out of Ja. I don't know if he'll get to the 27 part because Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. are going to get their touches, not just because they want them, just because it's Ja's nature. Like, if you watch Ja Morant play, he's going to go out of his way to get those guys involved.
And Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. are also both really good basketball players. That obviously, the team aspect, if all three of those guys are cooking, the Grizzlies are nearly impossible to beat. The narrative is there. The motivation is there. I just feel like it really aligns for a really strong bounce-back season for Ja Morant. And I really do believe that people are starting to wake up to that, right? Like, that possibility is there. And, Mark Stein and others maybe forget what this team is capable of when healthy. I think they're about to remind some folks. And the most Most obvious example of that is one Ja Morant. Thank you guys for being with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. We'll be back again tomorrow. I haven't forgotten about our trial of Derrick Rose. That might be a good day to do our trial, Damichael. Or I know you had an article come out today. We love to rehash what you did over the commercial appeal because it's great work that people should subscribe and read. There's lots of different angles we can take. All I know is the season's getting closer and closer, and if these folks that are listening and watching aren't already everydayers, they need to become everydayers.
Yeah, you definitely do. This is the last week before next week. I'll be up in Nashville. We'll have media day coverage and everything in between. So me and Joe are gonna be knee deep starting next week. But this week we got a lot of good things to kind of refreshing new content as well. And we definitely got to have that Derrick Rose conversation too. So looking forward to that.
It's going to be one of the few times that we disagree on this show. Folks love it when we get into good-hearted, friendly conversations about your childhood hero that is now washed. But I digress.
See how he just tries to throw that in there? He's trying
right at the end of the episode.
He's trying to bait me.
I'm sure you're actually going to be very prepared for when that debate happens. So whenever it happens, make sure you're checking us out here on Locked On Grizzlies. We'll be here with you each and every day heading into training camp getting started next week. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get your podcasts on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon. Subscribe numerous places. Make sure that you always have Damichael and I available to you, whether you're working out, on your way to work, hanging out in front of your computer, watching on YouTube, on your phone, whatever the case might be. Have us with you wherever you go. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon. Make sure you're checking out Locked On NBA as your second listen once you're done with Locked On Grizzlies. They do great work over there covering the entire league, but make sure you keep Locked On Grizzlies your first listen each and every time an episode drops. The next time that will be tomorrow. Until then, stay locked in, Grizzlies fans, just like the Memphis Grizzlies are already locked in, apparently. Again, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, literally anywhere you get a podcast, we are free and available. Wherever you get podcasts as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network. See ya.